Okay, hi everyone. I can see that we have some people joining us on screen. My name's Sheppard. I'm the CEO of the Queensland Farmers Federation. So good to meet you all, for those of you who I haven't met in person before. Thanks for taking the opportunity to join the webinar today. Just briefly, a little bit of background. The reason that QFF is getting involved in this space is that we're hearing throughout our membership of many farmers who are now actually having the opportunity to consider being a landholder host for renewable infrastructure projects. We're also hearing of farmers who had not considered that opportunity but are actually being contacted by multiple proponents. In a past life, in the last couple of years, I chaired the Community Engagement Committee relating to the McIntyre Wind Farm, which is in Warwick in southern Queensland. And during that experience a couple of years ago, we had quite a lot of engagement, obviously, with landholders and community members around that project. And it struck me that, this was a very new world for all of us. I have had some involvement in the gas boom in the Surat Basin, and we have the Gas Fields Commission and all these entities around promoting coexistence. But in terms of renewable projects, it's a new frontier. So QFF thought it'd be really valuable to create a bit of a toolkit or a resource to help farmers I guess, be better equipped and think through all the things that they need to probably consider before they embark on an opportunity around being a landholder host or being involved in a renewable infrastructure project. So we think it's very timely. We've had the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan announcement a couple of weeks ago, which is obviously a very ambitious plan around renewable energy and other infrastructure focuses. So we're going to be developing the toolkit, which will be available early in the new year. But as part of the learning, we're also engaging with some farmers who have already been through this experience, either with wind or with solar. So we have James with us today, which we're really looking forward to hearing some of his learnings from his own experience. So we're pleased that you joined. I hope that you learn a lot out of the presentation today. The format is very relaxed. I'm going to throw to my colleague, Andrew, shortly, who's just going to quickly run through what the toolkit kit actually is all about and what it's going to contain. Then we're going to throw to James, and we're going to hear, James has got a presentation, and we're going to hear of his experiences in his hosting a solar farm on his farm journey. And then at the end, if we haven't run out of time, we'd really like to promote some questions from all of you guys. So very relaxed format, but welcome. Thank you for joining us. And I will now throw to my colleague, Andrew, just to quickly give an overview of the toolkit that we are building.
Great, thank you very much, Jo. Appreciate that, and welcome James, and welcome everyone who's joined us. And I'd also like to welcome Jonathan Mendez, also from our QFF team, who's helping us write the toolkit, and he's working behind the scenes with us today, and will be funneling all your questions into us so that we can hopefully answer them for you. So I'll just run through a bit of an intro and then introduce James. And like just a couple of quick things before we do. Like Jo said, we want to keep it fairly relaxed, so please feel free to add questions to the Q&A box whenever they pop into your mind. But we do have you on mute just because of the number of people and managing background noise and everything. But we'll welcome your questions through that chat box. And we're also going to invite you to contact Jonathan and I at the end of the webinar, to talk about any experiences you might have had with renewable energy as a landholder or a developer. So the idea of the toolkit, we're working in partnership with the Queensland Department of Energy and Public Works to develop a toolkit to help Queensland landholders to understand how to go about engaging with renewable energy developers about the use of their land for renewable energy projects. So the toolkit will help people understand, what the value of their site is to developers, what relevant legislation they and the developers will need to be taking into consideration understanding the different stages of project development and what will happen during each of those stages, how to prepare for negotiations and the development phases, like what information you might need to have ready to go for these discussions, and what information and advice is available to help. And there's a lot going on, as Joe mentioned. The Renewable Energy, the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan was released only a week ago, and it's predicting by 2035 a huge growth in renewable energy in the state from around 3 gigawatts now to around 25 gigawatts, and 80% renewable energy capacity. And so the graph on the left shows, you know, at the far left-hand side, our current mix of energy, with yellow being solar PV and green being wind. And then at the far right, 2039 to 40, you can see the growth in that, particularly the solar and wind installed capacity over that period of time, which is only 18 years. On the right-hand side, that map shows the 3 renewable energy zones, and it shows a good number of those projects that are known within those zones already, and importantly, those 2 large pumped hydro projects that were announced by the government last week. So these images are both from the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan, which you can find online. So the toolkit will include a checklist with relevant information for landholders, a guideline with suggested actions, some of the considerations for dealing with proponents, some of the case studies that we will pass on from some of the discussions we have over the course of this project development, and some of the resources as well. So this webinar, for example, and any other relevant news articles and blogs. So I'll just hand over to James to talk about give a bit of an introduction about him and the Longreach Solar Farm. I'll just bear with me for 2 seconds while I switch over to James's presentation.
Am I live there now, Andrew?
Yes, you are.
All right.
You see your presentation there, James?
Yeah, got you. Thanks very much, mate. Very good. And welcome and hello to everyone this morning. And thanks, Joe, for having me on and you know, letting me participate in this project. I think it's great. You know, visibility for landholders and also developers is brilliant to actually ascertain the best solution for, you know, whatever opportunity there is that's being presented. So I suppose from my point of view, you know, we're based in Longreach, so, you know, we've got a fair bit of sunlight out here, and solar made sense to us. So we were looking far before we initialised the project for a solar project. So it just didn't sort of land on our, you know, on our lap. We were sort of seeking that out. So probably in about 2012, I think we were looking, you know, for that opportunity. There was no funding available, and the cost per kilowatt hour to actually set up a solar farm didn't really make sense. But with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and ARENA, when that was announced, we sort of pulled off all our, you know, pulled out all our previous planning and, you know, and sort of approached a couple of companies to help and assist us to put a proposition forward. So yeah, so as you can imagine, Longreach, you know, very dry, very you know, a lot of radiant sort of energy there. So it just sort of made sense. And in terms of, I suppose, where people are looking close to transmission lines, our, you know, land per acre is a lot less than a lot of these other areas. So so it made sense to us. So that's our farm there that you can all see on the screen. You can see that, yeah, it's pretty dry when we sort of kicked it off, and yeah, and you can sort of see it's a next tracking, I suppose, array system, which has been quite interesting, you know, for everyone to sort of, you know, become familiar with. So I might go on to the next slide there, Andrew. Yeah, I suppose just a bit of context in terms of, you know, why we sort of did this. We're in the middle of drought when we did it, and we didn't have any production opportunities in terms of, you know, putting kilos on cattle or kilos on fleeces or generating much income at all out of the country. So we're I suppose, historically a very diverse business. We've got tourism as well, and software, and a few other businesses, outside of the area. What we're sort of looking at doing with this was in Longreach, there was a lot of people leaving, so they're all, sort of all the contractors didn't have much work. The commercial, I suppose, environment completely shifted with the onset of drought. So we're losing a lot of families. We went from 400 school students down to around sort of 180 in the matter of sort of 18 months. So to arrest this, we thought a large-scale project would help, and it certainly helped with our, I suppose, positioning against all the other projects. So a little bit more context to that is, globally, there's, sort of close to 82 million extra people in the world every year. And that's the equivalent of about 920 of these planes landing, at a local airport and unloading each day. So it's quite a lot of people. They all need extra food, shelter, clothing, and energy. So in terms of I suppose the purpose of having renewable energy and also particularly solar is that we can support that a little bit more sustainably than our traditional I suppose energy sources. So if you'd like to move on there, Andrew, that'd be great. Yeah, so pretty much contextualizing it, it's the equivalent of Greece, Sri Lanka, Portugal, Ireland, Singapore, and Australia annually inhabiting the world. So you can see, if there is opportunity to make a difference, it's certainly worthwhile pursuing. Next one, Andrew. Yeah, so that's the landscape out here. It's pretty flat. There's not too much topography to handle in terms of setting up a solar. Not much vegetation either, and you can see the only shade's pretty much under that trough or under that hat that I've got. So it's great, to be able to sort of add a different sort of income proponent to our land out here. You can see the variability of rainfall. So what we were trying to do is actually initially with the solar solution is provide a different source of revenue, a different income stream to our farming enterprise. And you can see the variability in rainfall. So to stack up a repeatable, I suppose, farming system on that's very difficult. So if we can get something that was actually reliant or actually counter-cyclical to rainfall, we thought that was quite good. So you can see there Australia compared to Russia and in Ukraine and those sort of areas. There's a lot of consistent rainfall there that you can stack up a system on. So in Australia, it creates income variability. In the highest of the OECD countries, I can recall. Might go on the next one, Andrew. Yeah, so you can see Longreach is one of those red dots. So that's the most variable rainfall area in the most variable continent in the world. In the world. Next slide, Andrew. Yeah, so you can see there the income actually reflects that. So if you can install a diversification piece like this, it works quite well. Next slide, Andrew, please. Yeah, so pretty much to combat that, our farm, we just sort of split it up into and really developed it heavily into, when we could get, I suppose, the biomass to be able to support livestock, we could put as many on as we can. And so at the moment we've got 1,800 head of cattle on, and previously 2 years ago we had 0. So you can see, you need the infrastructure for that. But what else can we add? And that's where the renewables come in. That's the outcome of sort of developing, more water and more intensity in grazing. And obviously, when the biomass, evolves, that you can sort of capture it. The best way to do that is any means possible. So we baled about 72,000 bales of hay, all of that sort of calibre, and sold it around Queensland, the Northern Territory, and some went into South Australia. So it's on. When it's on, it's on. I'm getting this tone right, Andrew. You're flicking slides with the tone, so that's really good. Tourism is a big part of what we do, and and you can see that we have about sort of 4,000 to 5,000 people through a year, and they're very interested about the solar and how we sort of subsidise our energy out here. Next slide, Andrew, please. Yeah, that's some of the attraction. The sunset is, you know, incomparable out here. So it's great. After it's done all its work for the solar, it rests for the night, and people just love it. It's incredible. And get in touch with it if you'd like to visit us. It's a great part of the world. Yeah, there's some more, you know, iconic scenes. We started up a yacht club as part of the diversification that Andrew's been to, which has been great. So next slide, please, Andrew. Cocktail bar is, you know, as part of a yacht club. So that's what we sort of developed as well. And next slide, Andrew. Yeah, so that's the farm. That's sort of where we are there, and it's supported by, I suppose, sort of a compound solar system where we've got a hybrid. We've got battery and solar, and you know, to touch on that, that was actually subsidised or given to us as part of the deal by the solar company. So part of the commercial piece was they would take us, you know, close to off the grid as they possibly could. So yeah, so that worked quite well. It's about a 24 kilowatt system with batteries, and yeah, it works quite well. We've got everything, and QFF helped us considerably to actually consider and make a measured approach to converting all traditional, you know, sort of power usage to more of a renewable and sustainable approach. So that was really great. Andrew was, you know, fundamental in that. Next slide. Yeah, and that's just the software component that we've got to offset the income. But by far and most, I suppose the most successful, I suppose, venture has been, you know, partnering with this solar company to actually generate some more income. Might go to the next slide again, Andrew, and the next one. Yeah, so pretty much that's just a bit of a context that I wanted to put around, you know, why we're doing what we're doing. It was to pretty much create a large scale, I suppose. Just hang on with me, bear with me a sec. Yeah, it was pretty much just to generate a large scale project so that we could support our local tradespeople and civil, and by doing that we could. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, and by doing that, we could, you know, we could really turn around and retain a lot of our skilled people. So, so the project was considerable at that stage. You know, it was a $32 million project. How we approached it was we went into I suppose, a letter of offer with the solar company, which was Canadian Solar, and from there we sort of devised, I suppose, you know, a draft contract and what we, you know, what we sort of wanted to get out of it and what they wanted to get out of it. But at that stage in the arena cycle, the deadlines are pretty you know, pretty tight, so we had to turn around things very quickly. And so we had to get council on board as well to do that, because it was a material change of use for the you know, for that land. So to actually I suppose enroll the council in that possibility was quite the issue with us, because they didn't have any background or didn't have any experience in terms of the initializing a solar project. So yeah, so there was a lot of education going on, and a lot of phone calls and hang-ups and recalls and things like that. So so that was probably the biggest issue we had, was getting locally this, you know, the local council support, which I would suggest is a lot easier now, given LGAQ and their visibility across some of these projects, and also the impact that they have for the local economy. So so Andrew, I just thought, you know, in terms of keeping this structured, you might like to sort of, you know, guide me through a few questions you might have in terms of, you know, what information you'd like to bring across to the people this morning.
Yes, will do, James. Thank you very much for the for that bit of context. That's really good, and it's really good to understand the your background and your reasoning for wanting to diversify in this way as well. So that's been really good. And you've touched on a couple of things that I'll come back and ask you. But also, I think you've also given us a quick tour of the Outback's oldest sprung floor boardroom, haven't you? Well, while you're doing that, the late Queen and Prince Philip visited some time ago.
Yeah, mate. It forms part of the story for the tourism. So yeah, so it's a bit of an attraction, but I couldn't control the the fixed phone. So sorry about that. My apologies.
That's all right. Excellent. Thank you. So I'll just go through a couple of stats, if I may, for the solar farm there at Camden Park Station. So it's commissioned in March 2018, and so it's only 4.5 years ago, but it seems like a long time in renewable energy, because that was when, as you alluded to, ARENA was still funding large-scale renewable energy solar farms because they were quite rare at the time at this scale. So it's a bit over 15 megawatts. It has 54,320 watt solar panels, so photovoltaic panels. And as you mentioned, it's a single axis tracking system, and you can see that in the close up there, that single axis system. It generates about 39.1 gigawatt hours per year of electricity, so it's capable of powering 500 homes. And so how many homes in Longreach, James, are there? Just to put that in perspective.
Well, it's about 2,300 homes, I think from last count. And but plus industry and commercial buildings, but yeah, it's it's a considerable sort of output.
Yep, yeah, sure is, and that takes up 86 hectares of your farm. And how big's Camden Park Station in total?
Yeah, so in terms of hectares, it's about sort of 8,000 hectares. So it's perfect, because you can see below those panels there, that's more unproductive land. It's what we locally know as a clay pan. So you don't get much production out of that anyway. But having said that, it still creates a commercial opportunity, because since we've had that solar farm there, it creates actually sort of, I'd say, sort of an open, extensive greenhouse effect, whereby the sun during the day at its hottest time has got the soil's got shade cast over it because of all the solar devices, and so all the solar panels, and so it actually grows a lot of a lot of vegetation now that it wouldn't have beforehand, and so. So there's a grazing opportunity there now. It's actually quite good and quite quite powerful.
Great, and you're able to graze the sheep in there then?
Yeah, absolutely. So so what we sort of did there was, I provided an operation manual for the solar farm to say how I would approach livestock management there. So in terms of the grazing rights, we've got grazing rights under there and an MOU to make sure that we're behaving, and also they treat the livestock with duty of care. So yeah, it's quite productive. I mean, you could probably run in that area 300 sheep in a good season, and that's quite a quite a substantial, or significant number, especially if you're running potentially if you're running a stud sheep enterprise in there, you can manage them quite well. So yeah, so absolutely, yeah, we get rights to that, and it sort of benefits them as well for for the grass that's growing as well. We can keep that down, so there's no fire risk to the farm.
Great, thank you. Screens here. There we go. So there we go. It's the photo that you provided to us, and that's during the construction phase, I imagine. But so you mentioned that you approached them for the development, so you were very keen, and you found Canadian Solar, and they after some discussions they gave you a letter of offer, and so have they ended up? Did that letter of offer become an option agreement or a right to occupy for the development phase, or did you go straight into a lease? Or
Yeah, it was an option to yeah, so it was an option, so it held, I suppose, security for them over the land, and they just made a a small nominal fee annually to keep that until until such times as they could actually work up a project. So they wanted the security if they were going to apply for funding or to raise capital, and so that sort of binds them in. It's negotiable, that price, but ultimately, if you've got 7 companies approaching you now, that is a bit of a bargaining item. So you might be able to ratchet that up now because of the competition that people are displaying, companies are displaying. Particularly Canadian Solar, they're a big company, so we were happy to sort of go with them. We had a lot of meetings with them. They sort of came to the site a fair bit, and they had a lot of confidence in us, providing, I suppose, adequate support for them to go forward. So that was great. It wouldn't have gone through. It wouldn't have gone through unless the council had the courage to, I suppose, support it. And by me saying that, they thought that they would get a sort of a material change of use per square metre from sort of rural to industrial and commercial, and so that figure was about sort of 640,000 to their mind, and so I think that was 3 days out from submitting, and Canadian Solar and the council said, "Oh, all right, we can't come to an agreement, so we're not going to make it happen." And obviously, council have got a big workload, so a big swing like this, doesn't really sort of appeal to them unless it's a safe bet. So when I said before, there was a lot of phone calls and hang-ups, I had the acting CEO telling me that it was off, and I wouldn't take no for an answer because I just knew the impact for the community at that stage, and so I think one day there was 20 phone calls between us, and some were answered, some weren't, some were hung up on, and some were explored, but ultimately, we got them to ring a neighbouring council that had another solar farm on it. And they saw, that they had to discount that rate a lot so that we could, match them. And that figure came down to around just under 10,000. So, to enable economic development, sometimes you need to have those, those discussions.
Yeah. So importantly, it's not rated as as an industrial estate would be in the middle of Longreach. They've reached some sort of agreement there about it being generally rural with a non-rural use there, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. And part of the deal for me, and I see Jo's got her hand up there too, Andrew, but part of the negotiation for me was to retain and use and explore and exhaust local content, so local tradesmen, civil contractors. So when they actually got awarded the grant, which was great, I had sort of like a speed, sort of an introductory service for all the local civil. So I did up a prospectus for all the tradespeople in town and all the accommodation providers, electricians, civil, carpenters, steel. Steel engineers, all of these guys, to actually, I suppose, introduce them to Canadian Solar, and also the, what would you say, like the, the people that are actually in charge of building it, because Canadian Solar used another company to build it. So we had to establish the relationship with them to actually benefit out of any activity out here commercially. So we had that. That was extremely, that was extremely beneficial to us for the cause because the community supported, but also to them as well because they realised that they could use local people. That a lot of these large firms, are not so much arrogant, but they think that they know all the best providers. Whereas if they came to Longreach, we've got one of the best civil, small to medium civil operators in Queensland, if not Australia. Very astute operated with great men. And so when they saw that, they just said, all right, well, we've just saved a hell of a lot of money in terms of ferrying, transfer accommodation, because we're using somebody local. So it provided a solution for them as well. And I'd encourage people to do that. We wanted to keep it somewhere, we didn't want it to go below 40% to use civil local content. So I think we end up about sort of 60%. So 60 or 80%, which was fantastic. And the employment, at peak, it was employing about 63 people. So it's very hard to find, workers at the moment, but at that stage, it was, it was a great project.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Joe, did you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, just a comment, James. Interesting to hear about your experience with the council, because I remember when that was a common experience for councils who gas boom years ago, and I think QFF worked very collaboratively, closely with LGAQ, and I think it's certainly something for of removing. The council has skills and understanding base in terms of their constituents, so their landholders, potentially can make the whole process much more effective and painless.
Yeah.
There's so many similarities around local government learnings back when the gas boom happened, and having the appropriate resource council to be able to work with farmers and landholders and proponents, help achieve a good outcome. So it's that you flag that, because as QFF moves forward with our relationship with LGAQ, it's certainly going to be an important factor for those regions who want to achieve a good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, initially they were quite threatened because, this was a large project. Why didn't the council bring it to Longreach? Initially they were quite threatened by the whole thing, really, and how does that affect their, their voting? What's a public opinion of a solar farm, and so, we had the drought on our side where we needed something, so I think in a boom period, there might be I think it, but back then it was quite, as you said, there were hardly any projects funded, large scale projects funded in Australia. So so the timing was, quite interesting for us in terms of everyone being educated well on it. So there's absolute synergies with the gas industry, I can imagine. But my experience is that I applaud the council for actually and the particular staff member to actually explore it and take yes for an answer. It was quite the thing. But yeah, I mean, locally now we've got fly in, fly out specialists in solar, so they're flying in, flying out from Longreach, not the other way. So people gain skills in this project, and then it's like a reverse sort of fly in, fly out, and they're bringing their income back to Longreach, and building better houses, and spending a lot more money, and it's just a really, I think there was, following this, there's about 12 of them that were doing it. So it's great stuff. But yeah, like when I sort of looked at this, my commercial lens went on, and I thought, okay, how can we benefit out of this? And so we provided, I suppose, a list of capabilities. So a capability statement to as a landholder to Canadian Solar and the other company, which was RCR at that stage. So we provided that, so we could say, all right, we can provide water, we can provide, sort of road base, we can clear the rocks out, sort of, do the fencing, any of those services we can provide to them to, liaise with council, liaise with, whoever really needed, where and when they needed support. So out of that, we sort of, came down to, an agreement whereby we had first right of refusal on most of the, activities, and that was great. One of the, so in terms of, that all-weather road that is in there, that's still there. But a lot of this all-weather road that you know, there's the hard stand there you can see in the images where there's trucks and buildings. The civil operator actually picked that up and ran that into our house and our complex. So now we can run tourism, you know, 365 days a year because of the rainfall. You know, would have affected us hugely this year, and we've been able to unload 1,500 head of cattle this year, you know, in pouring rain. So that's great. They also provided some fencing so that you know, if people took the wrong turn, they wouldn't come up to the house. You know, so we had that security as well. Yeah, we got the first right of refusal to clean and to maintain the grass, you know, there as well. Yeah, and then we also got the solar, you know, sort of array for our, you know, our business, you know, in at the homestead as well, which was great, and has been just paying dividends. On top of that, I suppose, you know, they've got an upper limit to what they can pay in terms of lease payments, so that's always negotiable. It's about, from my understanding, and you'll correct me on this, you know, maybe with a bit more detailed surveying, Andrew, but yeah, it's about $1,000 a hectare, and so that's, you know, we do that with a plus, I suppose, you know, inflation CPI every year, which is working out well at the moment, but not only that. I'd say they offered at some stage for us to invest in the project, and I was quite, because it was so new, I didn't really sort of take that option, you know, and potentially I could have just said, all right, no lease fee, you know, I want to be part of this project and reap the returns from the actual solar generation and subsequent sale. I didn't explore that just because I just didn't know how this would roll out. And, you know, obviously they've got a 25 plus 5x2 year lease on this property. They just tried to increase it to a 65-year lease. And I'd probably suggest that's mainly because they want to decommission after, you know, sort of 35 years. And that's going to be a massive cost because they've got 7,000 posts in the ground, you know, and they've got to return it back to, you know, back to original state. I'd probably suggest, and the feedback that I got was to actually just wait until that sunset is closer and then renegotiate then, because, you know, we've got a lot more power, you know, to, you know, renegotiate. So yeah, so that, you know, that was one, you know, one sort of insight. I've had a lot of people that have been approached me as well, and I've sort of been consoling to them and helping. But what I would have loved to see happen as part of this was actually a community fund whereby the community could actually invest in this project to have ownership, and so that any income that came out of it would go back to locals. I just, you know, there's not a bad taste, but there's just an element of, you know, what could have been if some of the residents that had you know, been generating revenue, even if they could just buy, you know, parcels of, say, you know, $10,000 or $20,000 in this project, there's a bit of upside there, you know. And so I would have loved to have created like a, you know, $4 million, you know, fund whereby, you know, the council might have invested in it, or, you know, individuals might have invested in it. I thought that would have been quite, you know, quite eloquent to actually do that, and then locals get buy-in, they've got interest in it. And so what I'd suggest, you know, from my experience, is you've got to move fast with these guys, because they operate at the speed of commerce. They don't sort of wait for, you know, sort of thinking to finalise. They're action orientated, and they've got deadlines. So, you know, you've got to be really on the ball, because if you want to provide water to them, you have to be ready, so that you can, you know, sign and go. You know, if you want to provide fencing, you've got to do that. If you want to throw an option up there, like, you know, a community fund, you really have to be on the front foot. So yeah, so that was some of my observations anyway.
Yeah, it's a great point you say that, because I just wanted to ask about, like, just going back to that option discussion. Look, you've raised a lot of really good points there about things that are in the agreements around timing and lease payments, and you know, those first right of refusal for different parts of the operations and maintenance. Did you negotiate those at that option stage? right up front, or did those negotiations come later on when you were negotiating the final lease?
They came later on, but in hindsight, the option at that stage at the option agreement, you've got more control, and over time then, so you can sort of do that. And if you've got 7 different proponents proposing to invest in a solar farm at your place, I'd probably suggest if you had a prospectus on what you are looking to provide, that would be great for the toolkit, Joe and Andrew. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose they are very commercial. These corporates are just they're machines. So you've got to really sort of skip to their beat. So the more preparation you can do, and kudos to you guys for doing this, the better. Otherwise, that opportunity's gone. Once it's operationalized and initialized, all the opportunities are over pretty much, apart from operations and maintenance. And generally, it's an electrician that they have as part of their team that will be doing that. Site inspections, things like that, might be something, but it's a bit of a distraction from your core business unless you're remunerated well for it. So that's an issue. Another aspect that we got the offer of was security as well. So we could strap on the black and whites and patrol at night and do that as well. We opted not to do that because there were some people in town that were looking for work. So we preferred to do other things, but they're all options. And I mean, if you've got a blueprint for the infrastructure on your farm to overlay a solar farm on, there's infrastructure that can be supported for like feedlots or sort of new paddocks, irrigation. You've got all these property plans that actually might come forward if you can I suppose mold a solar farm to your overall plan going forward. So I'd suggest we've done that. We've got some I suppose some really good holding paddocks for trading and things like that out of this, but also all-weather roads for tourism and potentially spelling cattle. We've got a caravan site there as well. It's extremely profitable, but it only works because we've got an all-weather road. So yeah, so those things are those things are quite interesting. I mean,
it sounds like you had a lot of plans there that you could share with Canadian Solar right from the outset. Like, I guess you had a farm plan, you had some no-go areas shown, you would have had biosecurity plans, and then even some plans about what you intend to do in the future with the farm that you're able to put on the table from early on.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we had many whitebird sessions with our business to actually work out how this is going to interact with us, because we're also organic here as well and GAP accredited. So they command massive premiums in the beef and sheep industry. So we can't let them use any chemical on this solar farm. So because of the impact to organics. So that's an issue as well, whereby they've had to make an adjustment from their side of things. I'd probably, in terms of, I suppose the construction company that comes in, the civil, you've got Encomb, you've got RCR that were formerly there. I suppose in terms of the trap there is a lot of these companies, well, at that stage were looking for work. So they really had a Dutch auction to provide to Canadian Solar, and so it was just a race to the bottom pretty much, and they were hoping that in terms of how they represented the quote, the overall quote. In Australia, I suppose traditionally there's a line item in quotes that have variations. So this particular project, my understanding is that variations, there was no room for variations at all, because these corporates are machines. So so all of a sudden the companies that are actually providing the construction side of things will put on a lot of pressure to deliver, because of the budget that they had to work with. So it was a very, very competitive process, this particular project, because it was one of the first to be rolled out. So if they proved this one out, got the systems right, they could roll into others. So they competed heavily. But I think that in terms of working closely with those companies that are constructing, always have a really good, healthy relationship with them, because ultimately they're the people that you're going to be working with. And they, in the lead up to providing the quote, they'd come out, but they'd take you to dinner, they'd impress you, but just make sure everything's written down, because my experience is, you build a relationship with one particular representative of that company, and then they'll change. So so they'll be seconded over to Spain, or they'll be, Next Track will buy them and take them over to the States, or so it's a bit of a revolving door. The companies that actually provide the infrastructure, and even the solar companies. So I'd suggest move forward, but move forward and burn the bridge, or tie off as you go, because next week that person you made that arrangement with might change.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because there's some very different business models as well, where so yours has been developed by Canadian Solar, but you have another owner there now, and there's a big difference. So, like, there's a lot of developers that prospectors that line up sites, secure approvals, and then sell them. There's others that take a more long-term view and develop, own, and operate in the long term as well. So, you're talking about a relationship potentially that could last. You talked about the length of your agreements. So you need to be aware and conscious that these are relationships you may have for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might have relationships for a very limited time. It might only be a window of 1 month. So you've got to bind your dealings down. You can't just say, oh, that'd be great, we'll put that fence in, and then another guy comes, oh, we can't afford to put a fence in. Who said that? Oh, he's gone now. So that's some of the issues. I'd say probably.
So for the long term, then, what's in and out as far as your farm operations go? Like, do you have to consult with the owner of the solar farm for certain aspects, and do they have to consult with you for certain aspects of it? Is there scope for modification or changing in your farming practices? How is that covered in the agreement?
Yeah, our farming practices are all as per our requirements. So there's no impact on us. It's just we in terms of setting up that for a grazing agreement, we have to put a trough in there, and we have to sort of manage the sheep effectively. But that's all pretty much. That's all. That's the only impact. I'd probably obviously you can see there the proximity to Longreach. It's perfect. The airport's pretty much 9 minutes from the solar farm. So practically when you see 9 minutes to gate at the airport, that's pretty much what we are here. So and also accommodation just worked really well, and we're right across from a transmission line there. So so they just had to direct drill across there. So I think in terms of commercial opportunities for people to go to solar, I think it depends on your farming activity, and you've got to do the numbers of losing that. If I had farming country, I'd probably suggest that I wouldn't consider putting a solar farm in. Unless I'd done the numbers, unless I'd done extensive sort of forecasts on world food price indexes, because you can see now things have doubled and tripled in a lot of commodities. So you really need to be mindful of that. Another aspect that's quite interesting about this solar farm that I'd like to share with everybody is it's great just to watch big business role. It was so impressive to see how quickly they set this up. It's in farming, we can take generations to build cattle yards, but these guys they just roll and they just float. So that was quite good and impressive. But I think the other aspect commercially to this farm is that in terms of the variance in income and variability there, now we've got an asset that we can liquidate. So, we don't have to sell the farm. We can actually generate a net present value on this farm and sell it to a third party. There's companies out there that will actually buy the lease and the rights to the income, and they won't particularly or necessarily want the land. So you can retain the land and you can sell. And that's actually quite a considerable number. Some of the solar farms that I've talked to, or some of the landholders that I've talked to that are actually proposing this, haven't realised that. So, I know there was one down at just recently sold, exchanged hands down near Wagga for in excess of $10 million. So that was just to the rights of the income. So there's a significant sort of uplift in capital available or wealth generation out of that. So a lot of people just look at the number, the lease number per year, but it's not until you compound it up and develop a net present value that you actually see some value if you need that capital at any stage. So so to your members, that might be something to consider as well when they're looking at this.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate that bit of feedback too. And it sort of makes me think of the advice that you must have sought at the time you were negotiating these agreements. So you would have had tax advice, accounting advice, legal advice. Did you have advisors for all of those things, James?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did, Andrew. Like the timeframes are very quick, so I just had to ring around and I had some really good friends in the renewable space, and so so I got a lot of sort of advice through recommendations of who to talk to. A lot of to tell you the truth, a lot of valuers, they've phoned me for advice on how to actually value these farms. So it's a very immature industry. Well, it was when we were doing it. So in terms of tax, and sort of legal advice and things like that, it was all pretty much retrospective. We just had to float with this. So that's potentially where your members and listeners and engagement is very valuable, to get everyone set. So if you can get an operation manual out of this, or a toolkit as you suggest, it's brilliant, great value.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to wrap it up fairly soon because we'll finish right on 1:30 if we can. But just a couple of quick questions to fire at you at once. With the benefit of hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently? And also, with the energy plan released last week, what's your couple of bits of advice to new landholders or landholders that are about to start negotiating with a renewable energy developer?
Yeah, I in hindsight, I might have actually wanted to tap into the solar farm so that we could, there was endless amounts of power. Because you only think in horizons, and I didn't think that far down the track to think that we'd have caravan parks and and potentially spelling and that sort of stuff. So I probably would have tapped into it somehow. I don't think I would have invested in it. What we're exploring at the moment, and what I'd love to explore further is I suppose having battery storage as well, so they can sort of sell into the market at particular times, where the kilowatt hours most profitable, because their base load, they're usually transporting, during the day when it's least, sort of beneficial. Probably what I would have also done is actually built this to the capacity of the grid. It would have taken up more land, but yeah, very soon after there was another solar farm that started up very closely, so it just ruled out any extra capacity that we could put in there. A lot of the infrastructure is actually built one way for energy creation, and so in regional Queensland, where they've got swirl lines, it's very hard to actually shift power around. So there's a lot of infrastructure there. In hindsight, mate, yeah, I think I would have just we did a lot of planning, but I probably would have done more, but we were pioneering sort of at that stage. So we didn't have access to what you're creating now, or really anyone with any experience. So I could only talk to people on the other side of the transaction to game, people on their side. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Look, that's been such a lot of good information in such a short time, and I think you've answered most of the questions that I had jotted down here to ask you without me having to ask you, because you've obviously thought this through and talked about it quite often before. But that's a nice photo of you guys at the launch.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. I did a lot of background homework for you here, Andrew and Joe. So I hope you appreciate the training I did. Anyway, I was mustering this morning going through it, but yeah, mate. This is pretty good. So that's a minister there. That was actually the one that's cut out. He actually owns Canadian Solar, or very much part of it. He was the general manager. The guy in the middle. He was a really nice guy, but he said, "I'm the tokenistic Canadian." He was a Canadian, so they, Canadian Solar needed a Canadian. But he was really great to work with, really good guy. And that was the team there pretty much. So it was great. But I mean, we've had a lot of joy in having it. We show every tourist, the solar farm, and they're quite interested about it and blown away once they can actually see across it and how expansive it is. But recently, last year, some of your viewers might have seen, we actually the solar farm started on the Amazing Race. So they had they had I suppose one of the activities. They had to clean 80 panels, and I had to inspect whether they were clean or not. And so they all had their scrubbing brushes out, and the panels actually weren't that dirty, so we had to spray Milo and water all over them to make them look dirty for the cameras. So it's a great system. It's great. This is good. Time will tell. In terms of the fit for use in this sort of sunlight. How long these panels will last, and obviously they've done a lot of testing on that, but yeah, I'd like to see the renewable space in 25 years' time to see where farms like ours are at, and what maintenance is required, to keep to have that upkeep and that generation still the same. So yeah, mate, every opening needs a red ribbon, and we got one, so it was good.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, again, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been really insightful. It's been a great conversation. I have asked you the couple of questions that have come up through the course of the webinar, and that's actually a picture of the Mount Emerald wind farm up on the Atherton tablelands there. So for the people on board, I just wanted to go through our process quickly for the toolkit. So we're in that second box phase at the moment, where we're very keen to talk to people about their experiences in developing renewables on their site, either as a landholder or as a developer. And we'd love the opportunity to have a discussion with you about the kind of things we've talked about with James, so that we can put together some really good advice for other farmers. Over the next couple of months, Jonathan and I will be writing furiously to get the toolkit all put together, with a draft in November and a final in February, with some communications and some details to come out around then. There are a couple of other projects along a similar line that you might have seen. The Energy Charter are consulting on social licence for transmission service providers at the moment for transmission corridors. So we can provide a link with the notes that we send out after this webinar. And you'll see also there's a recent report, in fact, yesterday released by the Farmers for Climate Action about opportunities for renewable, for regional communities and farmers for renewable energy. So our next steps are please get in contact with us either as a landholder or a renewable energy developer to talk about your experience to help us put this toolkit together. And if you use your phone to scan on that QR code, that'll take you to the project website, which is also listed below there, so that you can either just put your name and email address in there and we can get in contact, or you can email Jonathan or I directly. So I'd like to sign off quickly. Thank you again, James, for your very open and frank discussion. It's been grateful. We've been very grateful, and it's been really good. So thank you very much. Thanks to Jonathan, who's working with us on the project, and thanks, Joe, for the introduction. And with that, we'll leave you all to it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, James.
Thanks. Have a good rest of the week.